What's up, everybody? I am Charlie Marlow. That is the great Brenden Schaeffer. This is Low Hanging Fruit episode, I don't know, 14, 15, whatever it is. We'll figure it out. I'll put it in the description. And Brendan, the Cardinals won the pennant last night. How about that? They did it.
It was big, man. It's been a long time coming, but to win a pennant in late April after starting 9-13 is special, and I think that's only something the Cardinals could do, and by gosh, if they didn't do it last night.
Okay, so look, one of the reasons I wanted to record today is look, I don't like being a negative person. I really don't. But the Cardinals have given us a lot of negativity, and we got to shoot straight with the folks. Well, they have, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you gave me a look there like they hadn't.
No, you're right, you're right.
Okay.
I just
So
look sometimes, I don't
it's
know.
fine. All I'm saying is after they had a big win last night, the guys were into it. And I'm like, you know what? Let's do a podcast after a win and try to get some positive vibes going. So you were there as a working member of the media. Give us the vibe at Busch Stadium. Not a lot of people there.
No. They announced 33,000, there weren't that many. It was less than that, but, they were scattered around. It was decent, but I think it's all relative. We're changing our expectations because, like, the previous Monday, but the day before Sonny's first game a couple of weeks ago, they announced, like, 32, and I'm like, "There's not 15 here." But last night, whatever it was, the people that were there that stayed got to see something pretty special. At the beginning of the game, the vibes were awful. The vibes were the same as those other recent games where the Cardinals don't score and they miss opportunities. They didn't even get a hit or a base runner until the fifth inning. So you got like sort of the Bronx cheer from the fans when Arenado gets his first hit. It's like, all right, we're not going to witness any history tonight. Yeah. And then they did kind of witness some history. Paul Goldschmidt hit a home run. I mean, how often does that happen? So look, it was a weird dynamic to the game because about halfway through, and I'm sitting there in the press box, I'm sitting next to Jeff Jones, and we're like, eulogizing, like, man, if this thing doesn't turn around at some point, what are they going to, like, what do they do? Like, they can't just have the same game every time. What are they going to do? And, just kind of talking as you talk as a game goes along. But then they get into the later innings, and you get a, a gift from the starter for Arizona. They walk the bases loaded and Lars Nootbaar figures it out, slaps one to the left side, and he was hyped, man. Like on first base, yelling into the dugout, just trying to get everybody going because he could sense, everybody could kind of sense that they needed a spark. And I think there was probably no better guy to have a little moment right there than Newt, just because he's Newt and what he brings to the plate with his charisma. So they get a couple of runs, they're feeling okay, but there's you still could have had this game go 3-2. It could have ended there. You could have talked after about how well the bullpen really held it close, but we didn't make any run. We, didn't take advantage. Paul Goldschmidt hitting a home run was like, whoa, is this going to be different? Because we know what the struggles have been like for him. And then for Nolan Gorman to be the next guy to do it and to win the game on it on the first pitch against a lefty on a slider, like all these things, it feels like a collective sigh of relief. Goldie being Goldie after the game said, "Look, it's one game. It doesn't carry in or guarantee success tomorrow, but this was a nice one to get." You could tell Ollie Marmol's demeanor. He said, "We needed this one," and so it just kind of feels like, all right, something good can happen. Something good is allowed to happen cosmically to this team. Maybe everybody can just sort of settle in and be the players they're supposed to be at this point.
Yeah. So you mentioned the vibes. How about the tension, which Chip Carey, by the way, I'm going on a tangent here, but I've
Love
noticed that people are calling him Skip. Have you noticed this? It's only if you watch the games. Scott Terry did an interview with him, and then
Oh, really?
Ozzy, and they both called him Skip. And I
Oh
think that was
gosh.
just an accident, but I don't know why I brought that up. Anyway, Chip Carey, his name is Chip. His dad was Skip. Chip Carey mentioned the tension throughout the team
Yeah.
last night on the broadcast. And that's why I joked to start the show about the Cardinals winning the pennant. Look, I'm very happy the Cardinals won, but I think it also speaks to the sense of urgency. I put out a tweet on Sunday, and I'm kind of half joking, but it did feel like almost a must win with Sonny Gray pitching to
Yeah.
try to stop a sweep and not fall 6 games back because Sonny's games are your best chance to win. So, as you mentioned with Newt, the reaction to Newt's opposite field two-run single, it honestly kind of felt like a playoff vibe. And I think that that does speak to the real tension and sense of urgency where it is early, but the Cardinals did this last year and we said it was early every month until we realized the team was bad. And I think
Yeah.
there was or is a realization that, look, guys, we can't do 2023 again. I don't know. What do you think? I just felt like the reactions to Newt and to Gold, obviously a walk-off. Anytime you have a two-run walk-off homer, it's going to be crazy. You're gonna rip the jerseys off. But I felt like with Newt, with the Goldie home run, it felt like more and more important than just a game in late April.
Yeah, and even Gorman, he slammed the bat so hard it left a crater, I'm pretty sure, by home plate at Busch Stadium. But he said after, like, he was asked, "Was that some frustration that you're letting out?" He said, "No, I don't know what I did. That was just excitement." Like, he probably blacked out in that moment because you're struggling like that. You just want so badly to get the big hit for your team, and he comes up and does damage on the first pitch. So that's going on. I think it was Ollie that was asked about, was there something maybe said in a hitters meeting pertaining to like, hey, this is a good team. We got to start playing like we're a good team. So, like, I do think there was that urgency, and you can have all the urgency in the world and you can say the right things behind the scenes and be putting in the effort and all those things that they talk about. But until you win a game and until you start to see progress in the areas and for the players that needed to make that progress, it's really kind of just empty talk. And that's not to criticize, it's just the reality. Like the games matter. They thought they were a pretty good team at the beginning of last year and all the public comments they gave. But as you said, eventually the season happened and we found out they weren't very good last year. So to be able to have a game like last night can at least keep that hope alive that, hey, we are the team that we think we are. We just have to start proving it a little more often. So that was step one. I think everybody understands, although we joked to open the show, well, they won the pennant. I think everybody understands that there's a ton more work that needs to be done. But I asked Goldie, like, isn't it good to just get a little proof of concept for the things you guys are saying and believing behind the scenes? And he said, yeah, but it doesn't guarantee success for tomorrow. So I think that they just have to remain locked in. But hopefully, this is something that can catapult them a little bit.
Yeah, and with Goldie specifically, if you're looking earlier in that game, there was the one AB where he falls behind 0-2 and then he gets a high fastball and he clearly didn't check his swing and he strikes out. And when I was watching that AB, to me that's just a guy who's all in his own dome, right? I mean, doesn't know what's a strike, what's a ball. You're kind of half swinging on a pitch that was well out of the zone. And so when I watched that at bat, I'm thinking, man, this dude is, to quote Will Leach yesterday, down bad. That's what he was saying. The Cardinals are down bad, as the
They
kid.
were.
So for Goldie, I think it was the next at bat. I could be wrong. For Goldie then to hit the home run opposite field, which you love to see, and it wasn't one that just squeaked over the wall. And then even the other one, the infield single. Sometimes you just need some luck. Sometimes you just need something positive to happen, and you have the old swinging bunt or the swunt, as we call it, which sounds like a really vulgar word, a
I don't think
swunt.
you can
But
say that.
honestly, sometimes you just need things like that to happen to kind of get you going.
Yeah, and Goldie, was hauling ass, getting to first base, just trying to. He said, "I've got that mindset of just trying to get on base and see if we can't start something here." And his locker's a couple stalls away from Nolan Gorman, and we had just finished talking to Gorman, and Goldie was nice enough to wait, knowing that everybody was going to talk to him as well. And so he's like, Gorman was probably thinking the same thing of just trying to get on base or whatever. And then after we finish up with Goldie, someone told him, no, Gorman was asked, what he was thinking going up to the plate, and he said, to do damage. So Goldie kind of laughed and said, I guess everybody kind of thinks something differently. Because Goldie's point was, well, you're not going up there thinking you're going to hit the walk-off home run. You're just trying to contribute to something. And then Gorman, 23-year-old hotshot's like, yeah, I was going to do some damage. And on the first swing he did. Can I say this, though? You're right that I think having the progression of the night that Goldie did was important, and then getting the hit late because Gorman would have came up anyway, but just to have a guy on base and to have maybe a different situation, more pressure, bring in the lefty to face him, all of those things contribute to Gorman getting the pitch that he gets. But can we look at the two pitches and say, holy smokes, those are two cookies? 92 down the pipe for Paul Goldschmidt, and then the slider that was just a nothing, 84 on the inner half, right in the wheelhouse for Nolan Gorman. Those were two of the worst pitches I think that were thrown all night. However, that's not to take away from the Cardinals that hit him out. That's what they need to be doing with mistakes, and that's what we weren't seeing for a couple weeks from the Cardinals when pitchers give them mistakes. Gorman in particular, Goldie in particular, I've noticed the number of pitches both those guys would get, and you go, "Oh my gosh, that has to be a homer. How did you swing through that or foul it back?" Last night, those were two horrific pitches, but to their credit, they knocked them 425 plus feet each. They both home runs were just mammoth.
Yeah, the Gorman, nice 84-mile-an-hour hanger, and as they say,
That's nothing. I
you get a
mean,
hanger, you got to put a coat on it. So
I like that.
okay, and again, this is an obvious statement, but for the dudes to break out, being Goldie, which was so needed, being Gorman, which was so needed. Then the other guy, who isn't even playing really, is Jordan Walker. What do you
Right.
think the Cardinals should slash will do with Jordan Walker?
It's weird that he's not playing, but I also understand the side of like, hey, there's urgency to, like you said, it's late April, but it feels like almost a playoff vibe to we got to put the best lineup that can maybe win us a game today. And they kind of think Alec Burleson is part of that, given that he's been making some contact and doing some nice things. I think he had a hit last night, but still not really even hitting for power on his end. But when it's Jordan Walker, it's like you gotta, I don't know, man, you gotta play him. I think you have to play him or you have to send him somewhere that he's going to play. And I'm not a proponent of sending down Jordan Walker because I almost do put him in the same class as Gorman, where my take has been look, even if it's a lefty, if it's like it was a righty last night and he didn't start. Excuse me. But it's like a case where if he's not part of the solution, you're not going to reach your potential as an offense. Gorman hit 27 home runs last year. He's one of your best sluggers. I know he's going through it. I almost think you have to just ride through the flames with him and have him in the lineup almost every day, especially against a righty. Obviously, it worked out yesterday where they didn't, and he came in late and got the big AB, but I would have him in there. I think the same for Jordan Walker. The problem is, like, if you're going to stay committed to having a defense first guy in center, which is Ben Ciani, who's actually coming around offensively, so it all works out. But because of that, you don't have a spot for Burleson and Herrera and Walker. You have to sort of take and choose, and that's what Ollie's been working through. But we've seen Walker sit kind of a lot recently. I would be throwing him out there and seeing what happens. Like Jordan Walker had a really good season last year at 21 years old, started the year at 20. He's going through it right now, but I almost think for the Cardinals to be the best version of themselves, it makes sense to have him in there. And I don't know if you keep doing this every year of, oh, we're going to send him down because he's struggling. Does it kind of become a self fulfilling prophecy, or is that the way it should be handled? Like that's the development choice that needs to be made. I'm kind of caught between, but I'd rather see him stay and play, knowing that it's a little bit difficult to fit everybody in the lineup on a given day.
So I think I disagree with you. So let's have a nice debate.
Let's have it out.
First of all, this is not a fake first take debate. I actually do disagree with you. First of all, last year to me was different. I didn't like at all that Jordan Walker was sent down. I
Either.
feel like they gave him no room for error last year. Remember, he was about what league average offensively when he
Yep.
was sent down ish. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
Obviously, the defense was a struggle. That was not a good spot for the guy to be in. He was learning at the big league level. I did not like at all Jordan Walker being sent down last year. But then I look at right now. And by the way, as you were talking about Gorman, I guess I didn't realize he has 32 strikeouts this year, and still his production in terms of OPS is about 100 points better than Jordan Walker. So here's my issue with Walker. Um, I do think because he's look May 22nd birthday, so he's going to be 22 coming up here in about 1 month. Still very young. I just wonder at what point the lack of at bats for a position player, are you starting to hurt the man's development? And if you look at, so I'm on baseball reference here, his last 5 games, but this goes back to April 15th. So today is what? The 23rd. So we're talking about a full week, basically. A full week. The man has three, four, five, eight. He has 10 at bats. He has 10 at bats in the last week. So that I think we'd both agree that can't continue.
Oh, that's
So to
yeah,
me,
we agree there.
I agree with you here. You either play the man or you send him down because and I don't think this is necessarily going to happen every week. They're trying to fix some things and whatnot.
Yeah.
But 10 at bats in 1 week for potentially the future face of your franchise is not good.
No, it's like they're hiding him right now. So I guess what you're saying is we have the same premise. He needs to play wherever he is. Your premise is that might as well be AAA, and I'm kind of saying ride it through at the big league level. Like, would you just send him down at this point, based on what we're seeing? That the fact that they're not using him enough is that kind of because that's sort of where it starts. And then with Victor Scott, they would sit him for a few games and like, okay, he's gone. That so like the writing could be on the wall for something like that. He had his bobblehead night on Friday, did Jordan Walker, or I thought maybe you would have, you could have seen him go down Friday, but then maybe that was a reason not to do it. But they're not playing him. That's the weird part.
Yeah, that's where if you told me right now, we all get those emails, those transaction emails. If the next transaction email I get or text is Jordan Walker getting sent down, I would not be shocked whatsoever. And that wouldn't even be a decision that I would really question. Again, I understand I understand you can say it's kind of 50-50-ish, but with his production right now and this team just needing any type of offense, unfortunately, and by the way, I love Jordan Walker, just so everybody knows. I love the kid. But he's put himself in a spot. You're so hungry for offense that absolutely that should be on the table, being sent down, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, the part of the hunger for offense, though, still should have to come from the main dogs doing their job, which last night we finally saw it happen. But the hope was that Jordan Walker could take a step forward and be sort of in that category as one of your main drivers of the offense. And when he's not getting at bats and the numbers look like they look, and it's kind of a little bit of a broken situation, he hasn't really been driving the ball the way you expect. I would be almost okay with it being a quick refresh, go down for a little bit and knowing that, just kind of reset and come back up. And maybe by then the team isn't reliant upon every single guy because with Victor Scott, it was the same thing. It's like, well, this guy's not hitting. He wasn't really supposed to. They needed the other guys to hit so they could carry a defensive option. And look, he wasn't supposed to hit 085, but if he was hitting 170, nobody really would have minded. The Cardinals internally would not have minded because the whole plan there was defense first. But when the big dogs aren't hitting, it sheds more of a light on everybody who's not hitting, and it became untenable with Victor Scott. It seems as though the Cardinals right now sort of feel it's untenable with Jordan Walker, but I guess they have to make a decision. Is Alec Burleson going to play more, or is Jordan Walker going to keep his spot? And based on the way you answer that question, I do think you send it down if you think the answer is yeah, we're going to prioritize Burleson, Herrera, and those other guys because Walker's got to play wherever it is he should play. I don't know what they're going to do. I bet he'll be in the lineup tonight. I would imagine they put Walker in the lineup tonight unless that transaction does come because you can do it for like a weekend and a little bit of time. You can't just have him riding the bench for prolonged periods. That's just not going to work.
And it's important to note. So Walker's OPS 511. We're also talking about hey Burleson's is 549. So it's not it's not like you
No,
have
he's
great options.
not producing. He doesn't strike out as much, I would guess. Walker's got 17 Ks. Burleson's got 9.
Mhm.
Walker's probably got more plate appearances, but yeah, I mean, Burleson puts the ball in play all the time, and they just go right to people. I don't know. It's just what happens with him. So, at what point is that just like the player you are, and it becomes incumbent upon you to hit it where they ain't? I don't really know. Like it's not really something you think is a problem for guys that make good contact generally over the course of time tend to get more hits and it all works out. But Burleson has a lot of the times been hitting balls on the nose, but right to people. And I don't know, maybe I guess that's a skill. That's a skill to go, all right, here's the way that because you're hitting a baseball, it's a round object, hitting a round object, and that's a hard thing to do. We get it's the hardest thing in sports. But like if you have a big hole on the left side to hit it the other way, or you can pull it this way because you kind of have to do that. I think at a certain point, we can't just go, well, he's making great contact. What's his average? What's his OPS? Like at a certain point, that does matter.
Yeah, and it's important to note too. We were talking about Gorman earlier. I mean, even though their batting averages, I'm not a big batting average guy, but Walker and Gorman similar. But I mean, we got 100 points higher basically slug. I mean, Nolan Gorman has 4 bombs. Jordan Walker has 0 home runs. How about just big picture offense? Maybe I'll throw something at you here which will surprise you. All right. So, all right. I looked at this earlier. I think the Cardinals offensively, what were they? OPS. Let me make sure I have OPS here.
Bad.
Okay, Cardinals OPS is 26th in baseball. You're down there with the Twinkies, the A's, the Marlins, and those great Chicago White Sox.
Good
They're
grief.
coming to town soon. I noticed some giveaways. I think it's a weekend series. That'll be a fun series. The White Sox
The
and the Cardinals.
the
But
giveaways are the games that the Cardinals have to win against that putrid
right.
team.
Let me throw this at you. Do you think I'm crazy to say that despite the Cardinals being 26th in baseball in OPS, big picture with this team, I'm not changing my mind. I still think that the issue that is going to be throughout the season if the Cardinals get back into it, I'm still more worried about the starting pitching than the offense. Am I crazy to say that? And I'll explain afterwards, but am I crazy to say that?
Right, so I don't think you're crazy to say it. I don't think I agree with you because, like, the offense could just be fine, but you have guys like Arenado who's kinda getting hits, and that's lovely. He's not hitting for power either. Like, if Jordan Walker has 0 homers and Arenado's gonna finish the year with 9 homers, like that I'm not saying he's going to, but if you're gonna count the pace that he's on, that's about what it would be. So, like, there are still some pretty significant concerns that I would have about the offense compared to the pitching. But tell me why, like, pinpoint it. When it comes to the rotation, I put you on the stand. Like, who are you worried about that you think doesn't hold up to what they've done so far? Because other than Michael, you've had a really rock solid rotation to this point.
Okay, so first of all, on the offensive front, I feel like we do this every year. I feel like we always do this, and we all know at Busch Stadium when it starts to get nice and hot. Like I just feel like we're gonna see May, June, July, August. All of a sudden, the Goldies of the world and the Arenados of the world are gonna hit 4 or 5 home runs per month. And I just think sometimes we forget how long a baseball season is. And that's why I joked about the must win. I half joked. But what's crazy is a month from now, we're gonna have 25 more games to break down. And then still what? There's going to be 100 games left in the season or whatever the number is, right?
Yeah.
Like the baseball season is so long. So here's why I talk about the starting pitching. Are you a FIP guy? I'm kind of into FIP.
So I didn't used to be, and I don't like to overlook at it, but I honestly I like to look at FIP to tell you how a team's defense is in a given year. Because if
Okay.
you look at Miles Michaelis over the last few years, I feel like he's a guy who relies on defense. And no, I used to call people FIPsters if they kept throwing FIP at me. Like, get over yourselves. But I think it can be valuable to go, okay, this guy did or didn't outperform his expectations based on FIP. I almost just look at I say, okay, that's the kind of defense that he has or doesn't have. But I understand that you're going to look at FIP to decide, like, would you prefer FIP to ERA to decide how a guy's performing? Is that what you're getting at, or maybe not quite that far?
No, I do like that. I just think it's more fair and takes a little bit of the luck out of it. And I think if you look at most players' careers, I always find it interesting. I can be a baseball reference nerd. Most pitchers' careers, it's hard for the FIP and the ERA to really be that different for a career, but it certainly can for a season, right?
Yeah.
We've seen that a lot. You can have a FIP that's a difference of a run and a half, two, whatever it is. So look, is it kind of fair to say that the narrative for the Cardinals starting staff has been maybe even a little better than what we expected? And as I'm looking, I'm trying to find the stats here. So overall, by the way, so the Cardinals relievers ERA is 3.33. The starting staff, it's not good. I'll find it right here. So it is
Last night hurt
4.
a little bit.
Yeah, it's 4.26. It's 21st in baseball. So we're kind of saying, hey, maybe the staff is better than we thought, and they're bottom third of the league. And so when I look at FIP, and I'm watching the games though. I'm watching the games. Look, Sonny Gray as advertised, Steven Matz as advertised, but also from a FIP standpoint. And I think Lance Lynn is the guy that. So here's how I'll throw it to you. Do you think Lance Lynn is going to finish the year with a sub 3 ERA when his FIP is closer to 4.5?
I do not think Lance Lynn will finish sub 3, but where would you set the over under on his ERA? Because I still might take the under of a reasonable line.
Well, I think anywhere around 4.2, 4.3, whatever it is. I mean, even if it's FIPy, if it's 4.47, that's kind of what I expected. So what
Okay.
I'm trying to say is,
I
if
hate
we
Lance
think
Lynn. I heard you.
no, no, I love Lanson. But if we're thinking that Lance Lynn is probably going to come back to earth a little bit in terms of results, allowing runs, and even if you look at Miles Michaelis, who has a better FIP than ERA, I just Kyle Gibson to me is a guy who we joke about it a lot, but it's riding the roller coaster. He's gonna have some outings where he's damn good, but man, I think his bad ones are gonna look really bad. So look, maybe that makes his ERA actually look worse because look,
Yes.
if you lose a game, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter from a result standpoint if you lose by one or if you give up 8 earned runs.
Yep.
So Kyle Gibson does seem to be the guy where he can pitch really well, but his bad ones are really bad, and then it makes his ERA look pretty dang high.
Did he get so correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the game against Miami, he gave up 2 3-run bombs in the first inning for 6 runs. I think that's what it was, what, a couple weeks ago, Cardinals' first homestand of the season. I think that's what it was, and I think there was something going on where he was maybe tipping in that first inning, and they figured it out, and he was able to get through the 6 innings, and we gave him a trophy for it because it was helpful to the bullpen. If you and I know you can't do this because like you said, the problem with him is going to be that he'll have some of those innings throughout the season. If you take that inning out though, his ERA is 2.88. I know you can't take that inning out. That was a game that they lost because you can't take that inning out. But his ERA overall including that inning is 5.0, and that's maybe about where he is, but like you said, I think you can almost live with that where there's going to be some games that you give up because of him, and maybe you pick off 1 or 2 of those games because your offense shows up and you win a shootout. That'd be kind of fun. But overall, like if he's your number 5 starter, he's kind of done what I've expected, and honestly, he's been a little better than I've expected. Not because I thought he would be a 5.5 ERA, but because I can isolate that one moment to say, I think this was something that they had figured out why it happened and addressed it very quickly. And other than that, he's been pretty darn good. The Lance Lynn thing, like I would not set the ERA over under in the fours for him. I think he's going to be in the threes. So
Okay.
maybe because I've said going back to the offseason that he's their second best starter. He's got the upside to be a guy with a 3.5 ERA, maybe even better. You look at the all-star seasons and the great years he had, like 19, 20, 21, 22. He's not that far removed from that. Last year was so damn bad that it's almost impossible to imagine that Lance Lynn would go back to that. But in my head, and I think the Cardinals probably felt this way too. I don't know internal what all they had to say about why he struggled last year, but I just kind of chalked it up to it's a White Sox thing, and he was just going out there and giving up bombs, didn't really care, seeing how many Ks he could rack up. He had a humongous strikeout rate with Chicago, got traded to the Dodgers. They said, hey, here's maybe do this or that. We're kind of in a pennant chase here, so it matters a little bit that you don't give up a homer to every batter, and his ERA was like 4.3. He didn't strike anybody out, but he got by on his stuff. I think Lance Lynn, the expectation is like come in here and be the guy you were before last year, like throw out 2023. If he does that, he's their number 2 with like a 3.6 ERA. That is my expectation. I think he'll come up from 2.8, but like he didn't pitch well last night. Lance Lynn has this thing where he can have these games. It's almost like a magnet out of the strike zone because his fastball will tail this way and it'll dip this way and dive. It's like he throws it, starts in the middle, and then it just cuts out of the zone. And when he's not kind of pinpoint on location, I think hitters pick up on that. And like, I'm not swinging. So that's how you get 94 pitches and only 54 strikes last night. And that's how you only find a way to get through 5 innings. But I think he's enough of a gamer that even when he has those outings where he said, I did it to myself last night, walked a few guys, but he only gave up 3 runs and he gave you a chance to win. That's unless he starts giving up a ton of bombs. And at Bush, it's harder to do that anyway. That's going to be like the bad version of a Lance Lynn outing. And then he's going to have the days where he's on point like he was in his previous start, I want to say, the 7 inning one. And then he ends up kind of leveling out on the ERA. I think the difference in how we view the rotation is Lance Lynn. Because I'd almost not put Miles Michaelis at a spot where I think he's going to be much better than he's been. Like, unless I know historically he's not a 5.80 ERA or whatever it is, but I mean, you talk about 84 mile per hour hangers. His slider is like a nothing pitch at times right now. The 2 home runs he gave up to the Brewers, one of them was even out of the strike zone, but it's like the guy can just look at the spin coming in as a lefty and golf it out like it's nothing. Miles' stuff as he's going to have to be pinpoint on location. But I'll remove him from it because they're kind of getting by with what he's doing anyway. I trust what we're seeing from the rest of the rotation, acknowledging that FIP and ERA is going to level out a little for Lance Lynn, I also think he hasn't pitched as good so far to the FIP as he might be able to do as he gets going.
Yeah, and by the way, I love Lance Lynn, and he's such a freaking gamer, and he battles. He's I don't want to say he's more fun to watch than Sonny Gray because Sonny Gray has been so dominant, especially the other day with the strikeouts. But I love watching Lance Lynn battle out of jams. There's a lot of times I feel like I look up and there's always traffic, and there's always bases loaded, whatever it is, and he seems to get out of those jams more times than not, which is really fun to watch. So, by the way, in me saying this. I guess the reason I say this is more because the staff is actually about what I thought it would be, right? And so I guess in me saying this, it's because the offense has been so bad. I still think the offense is going to really, really improve. But I guess I'm looking at it because it's fair to say the bullpen is about what we thought. We both said, I think, top 10 bullpen. They've
Yeah.
been that. I think we both said mediocre-ish starting staff. They've been pretty much that, whatever it is, middle of the pack, maybe a little worse.
The
But
rest of the
we
league is so good, that's why. I thought
okay,
4.2 ERA, it's everybody else that's better. That's their fault,
okay.
not the Cardinals.
But we both thought the offense was going to be potentially top 10. And right now it's one of the worst offenses in baseball. Now, I still think the offense is going to end up probably being more middle of the pack. But I guess what I'm saying is I thought this team could survive with a middle of the pack rotation because I thought the offense was going to be potentially really good.
Yeah.
Now I think you might have middle of the pack offense, middle of the pack rotation, which to me does not equal a playoff team. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Maybe you get there on grit and guile with a team that statistically doesn't belong, but you win 84 and you just figure it out. And maybe you because you were a big proponent, before the season began of see where you're at in July, and those teams that are in the mix are gonna add. And maybe the additions that are made at that point allow the Cardinals to look like a different team and act like a different team when they get to September, October. So I still feel like that's a possibility as well. But you're right, like, it would be very difficult to sit here today and look at an offense that ranks in the bottom 5 in basically every category and go, "No, that's still a top 10 offense and everything's gonna be fine." Like, I feel like that's the way the Cardinals feel internally about it, but have we seen enough of a sample size to where we go, all right, like they're going to be a little lesser than we thought they would be offensively. It's unlikely that all of these guys turn it into career norms given what they've already produced. That's going to be maybe a tough ask. I will say, though, too, another element that we haven't really measured that I think has been pretty good has been the defense. And so that's one of those sort of intangibles. But at the same time, like the defense is going to play into what your pitching staff ERA is. And as you said, they're 21st in starting ERA, 4.26. I think they can get away with being a 4.2 ERA as a staff, as a rotation. But I also think there's room for that to improve if a guy like Miles Michaelis doesn't have a 6 ERA. But also, how much can you really count on that right now? Like it's been a bit of a struggle for him. So I think you're probably right, but maybe that's as simple as that. If you're 17th in starting ERA and ninth in bullpen ERA and you're 15th in runs scored at the end of the season, which maybe they can't even get to that, and we're having a different conversation. But if that's kind of the makeup of this team, well, it's going to take something else. It's going to take some luck factor to be a playoff team. I think that's probably a fair sentiment.
What about the Miles Michaelis extension? Is it it's always fair to talk about anything, but just the money involved. I know it's an easy look, especially because he's going to pitch here in a couple days or what tomorrow. But when you say, okay, Miles Michaelis has this 2-year extension, he's going to be 36 years old coming up here in August, and this is a market now where you could have got a Jordan Montgomery for 25 million. Now that was weird. We all know that. There was weirdness with the TV. He signed late. He fired Scott Boris, but I don't think the Miles Michaelis extension is going to be one that we celebrate. I think we're already complaining about it, and it could get to be Matt Carpenter esque
Yeah.
in the Cardinals' complaints. What do you think?
Well, and the problem is the way this team is designed, you can't sit Miles Michaelis like he's going to pitch every fifth day. Whereas with Carpenter, eventually it got to a point where it's like, okay, he's not playing every day. He can't look at his numbers. So that's it's almost could be worse in that regard. And they gave it early. It's a little different though, because I feel like with Carpenter, they gave him the extension because of the Cardinal legacy and all of that. it just realistically, it never made sense to do it a year early for him because who were you going to be fighting for him in free agency? But like it's internally, it's like that's a thing they don't want to have to face because they don't want to make somebody mad or they don't want to do the uncomfortable business thing. Like I don't know if that's a DeWitt thing or what that is, but that's sort of been the way they've handled it. We've mentioned that with Goldie, they have shifted a little bit on that. They didn't give him the legacy extension when he still has 1 year left to potentially crater. And, so they gave it to Michaelis last year for this year and next. So he pitches out 2023. And it's like, oh, if we would have just let 2023 play out, we probably could have gotten him for cheaper because where was he going to go? Like, even if you wanted to get him back, he's from Jupiter. He's very happy to be a Cardinal. It just probably, yeah, probably didn't need to happen when it did. But the other side of that is the thing that the Cardinals are always very afraid of, and that's like having to spend more money than they are comfortable doing because the circumstances change and the guy pitches great, which would have been a great thing. Maybe they wouldn't have lost 90 games last year, but they wanted Miles Michaelis. They knew if they didn't get him back, they would have needed like four starting pitchers to replace the other two free agents who they ended up trading and to replace Wainwright. And I think they just went into a spring training going, Mo might be able to get you 3 next winter, but he's not gonna be able to get you 4. And is that the right thing to do? I don't know. Like, we saw how easy it was to get 3, not to say that it was easy, but you had these guys that wanted to be Cardinals, and they did it, like, before Thanksgiving, and you got Sonny Gray really early, and then the offseason went, and maybe like, should there be a little bit of foresight from the front office to see what we act surprised every offseason? Wow, the free agent market's really not, it's kind of at a standstill. What's going on? It happens like every year. So, is there ever going to be a market where the mid tier Seth Lugos and Michael Wakas of the world aren't attainable for that 15-ish $1 million price range per year? Probably not. But it's like the Cardinals didn't want to enter a season where the overhaul would be just so overwhelming to do in the next offseason that they felt we got to sign somebody. I think they signed Michaelis instead of Montgomery because one, Monty was Boris at the time. Two, Michaelis is easy because again, he's a Jupiter guy that he's happy where he is.
That shouldn't
It,
matter.
it
Where
shouldn't
he
matter,
lives should not matter.
but functionally, it absolutely matters for John
I know.
Mozeliak because Mo there's got to be some dots to connect for Mo to sign a guy almost. They're not just going to go out and sign a guy they have no familiarity with. And that's I, I agree with fans that get frustrated by that because it's like, why? If a guy's a good player, offer him money. You don't have to take him to dinner first. You can offer him money. And if he says no because he doesn't want St. Louis or whatever, okay, so you got told no. It's not that embarrassing. Like you bounce back from it. I feel like the Cardinals don't really like to shoot their shots sometimes on some of these free agents unless they've done a extensive background and they circle the drain for 3 years on him and they wanted to draft him 10 years ago. So it worked. Like that's Sonny Gray. So I feel like there would be some room sometimes to do that, but Miles Michaelis was sitting right there coming off a good year and it was easy. So that's what they did. Are they going to regret it? Yeah, probably a little bit. It's not going to, it's like he had the signing bonus and now it's 16 mil per year for 2 years. It's not the end of the world, but you're also going to feel compelled to keep him in the rotation. If it should go 5.9 ERA all year, is it too exciting to think about him back in that rotation next year? I'm not saying it's going to be that, but then that would be a sign of 2 years in a row of decline if he doesn't bounce back this year. So, like, those are things that you would end up thinking about and probably going, yeah, maybe not the best extension.
Yeah, and by the way, the real issue here, and it's the reason the Cardinals have not been elite, and it's the reason they were elite in 11 to 15, is it seems like John Mozeliak has to get 2 to 3 starters every single year for about the last 4 years. That was never the case. So you have all these tough decisions. And the reason for that is you're not growing your own drafting, developing, homegrown
Preach.
guys.
Yep.
No, and because look, if you go back to the trade deadline where they had to add what? Lester, Hap, and Wade LeBlanc. And then the next year, trade deadline, they go ahead and they add Quintana, Montgomery. Last year, you would have had to add, I mean, if you didn't suck, you would have had to add, let's just say they were good. They
Yeah.
would have had to add at least two or three. They would have replaced Wayno, whatever the hell was going on. Mats was hurt and all that. And then look at this offseason. They literally went out and got 3 starting pitchers. So that's what, 3, 4 years I'm talking about. They essentially had to add 2 or 3 starting pitchers every single year just to get through the season. And I was laughing when you were talking because I've made the joke on radio a million times that like the people that want to come here are boring white guys in their 30s and they're 35-year-old family men, and
Yeah.
we always joke it's dudes that live close by. And then I never even thought about it with Michaelis, and that's because he lives close to spring training. Like we do it with Lance Lynn. He lives an hour and a half away. He's familiar with the team. Gibby, Kyle Gibson went to Mizzou, wherever he lives now, familiar with Missouri, wherever his wife is. I don't even remember. Sonny Gray, Nashville, close by. And now we're doing it with Miles Michaelis because he lives where the spring training facility is. I mean, isn't that kind of hilarious that like part of the calculus is these guys want to be here and kind of live close by?
It is because it's easy. Again, the Cardinals don't when do they make a free agent move with somebody that's you go, "Oh, I didn't really see that coming." Like that's kind of a crazy what compelled them to spend up on that guy? Like by the time Wilson Contreras signed, we were like, "Yeah, the Cardinals obviously need this catcher, so what are they going to do here?" As my cat really tries to get into the shot. They had to go have a big long meeting with Wilson Contreras in Florida because it was like, well, this is different. Why we don't already have a preconceived relationship with this guy, but they saw him within the division, so they felt like they had a good handle for what he was. They were completely wrong. They expected things of Wilson that were not realistic asks of him to replace Yadier Molina, and that's part of how their misplaced expectations are part of how all that weirdness happened last year, in my opinion. But yeah, it does seem to be a trend. Think about Goldie. How many years did it seem like the Cardinals would trade for Goldie? It would make sense before they actually did it. Arenado. It seemed like they have to do their digging. It seems to feel comfortable with something. They can't just go into an offseason going, well, there's 92 free agent starting pitchers that are pretty decent. Let's pick four. They don't feel comfortable with doing that. And so yeah, Michaelis is from Jupiter. Let's go ahead and just get him back. Now to Michaelis's credit, he had a really good year before they signed him. But also, when you look at his numbers historically, like he's never been a guy that strikes out many people. And so, is that something where you're like, if you lose a touch of the velocity of the stuff, of the bite on the slider, is he going to be easier to square up for opposing batters? And is that something that could concern you as he ages? Or maybe they thought, well, he doesn't strike out people anyway. So when he gets into his, mid late 30s, that's not going to matter because he always has been pitched to contact and he'll stay that way. Like, I don't know what the thought process was there, but no, I think it's easy to joke about the guys who live close by. Like even the Brandon Crawford thing was like, well, they were at the bottom of the barrel, basically desperately needing to have a little bit of coverage for shortstop. And they had to pay a little bit extra to convince this guy who's spring training in Arizona, lives in Arizona, doesn't necessarily want to go to Florida for spring training and have to uproot the family in that way. Like that took giving a little bit more money, and it's something that the Cardinals don't usually do. But the whole backup shortstop market was moving that week, and they sort of were like, "Oh, we have to spring into action and get somebody." You can look at pretty much every signing they do and sort of trace the constellation of how it came to be. And in a lot of cases, you're right. Well, he lives close by. Let's go ahead and get him. It's kind of silly, but it does also feel like there's some merit to it that it happens that way.
And you mentioned the Seth Lugos, Michael Wakas of the world. I think that's a good reminder that you can always get a veteran starter, and a lot of times on a 1-year deal, whether it's 12 million, whatever it is. And those are the type of deals, in my opinion, that are never really bad deals. That's Lance Lynn, that's Kyle Gibson. Now, even if those guys were bad, a 1-year deal for a starting pitcher, and then you can try to add at the deadline, those deals don't cripple you. The problem with the Cardinals, this is where I think the fan base sometimes is off. It's not about spending, it's about spending wisely.
Yes.
Now we can go back and we can name all the names, but the reason the Cardinals get into trouble, look, they're pretty good with some of these superstar type guys. Obviously, Goldie, Arenado. I'm even going to throw, I don't know if it's fair to call Wilson Contreras a superstar, but a really good player deserving of a big contract for a catcher. Okay, those are good deals. The 1-year deals for guys making 10 million, whatever it is, even go back to Greg Holland. Those deals don't kill you. The deals that have killed the Cardinals, deals or extensions, are giving too much money and too many years to, as the kids would call it, mid guys. Mid. Hey, that guy's mid. I'm talking Dexter Fowler. I'm talking Mike Leake. I'm talking Brett Cecil. I think it's fair to call the Carpenter extension. It became that or worse. And I think the Miles Michaelis extension will be that as well. It'll be too much money for a mid guy. Now you can say, okay, maybe he's making $5 million more than he should. But it's also about, well, what if he has a 6 ERA, 5.8, and we feel compelled, like you mentioned, to put him in the rotation next year? That's where the Cardinals get into trouble and have for the last, what, 5 to 8 years. Start with Mike Leake and Fowler. What was that? Was that 8 years ago? That's where they've really got into problems.
Yeah, and I think you could also look at it with the Michaelis deal and say, all right, if he's making 16 mil, you've locked yourself into that 16 mil for the next 2 years as though it wouldn't be possible to pick up another 16. Like if that's what you're willing to spend, you could do a 1 year deal going into 2025 for a guy that's making 16 mil and have him maybe have some more upside than what it seems right now that Michaelis has. We're beating up Michaelis because he's struggling, but he also struggled last year. And this was supposed to be the year of like better defense is going to lead to better results for Miles. And you're a handful of starts into the season, and it's kind of going the other way on him compared to what happened last year. So I think that's what it is. It's locking yourself into a deal with a guy that it's the money of it, but it's the opportunity cost of you can't replace that guy in the lineup. You can't replace that guy in the rotation. How many springs did they bring Matt Carpenter and say, this is going to be the year? And then it wasn't. So I think for Miles Michaelis, like he could have a 5.8 ERA this year, and I would not be surprised if that's kind of exactly what they say going into next spring. It's like, well, he's going to do this thing differently. And everybody's going to be like, how? Like, what's suddenly going to change if this year's bad, which it may not be, but we're talking as though if this kind of trajectory continues, what's to suddenly think that another off season is going to change it? But the Cardinals, look, they felt like, well, we had to get a couple 1 year guys anyway this year to have had to do another one like from just I don't know if it's a manpower question within the front office. Do they have the time to feel like they can identify and land those and convince those and compel those targets to come? I don't know, but it when you think about the language that Mo and company have used about the offseason, it takes two, all of these kind of phrases that we hear, that makes me think it's part of it, that it's just like it's a risky proposition in their mind. But why? I mean, they signed these guys in November. They could have spent the rest of the offseason getting another one if they had to. They obviously didn't because they had five guys they were paying. But yeah, I think that's an interesting part of it that sometimes they make these deals. There's a question to be had of the Steven Matz contract too, as to whether that ends up being one you feel good about or not. And that's just been their MO to kind of lock into some of these deals that you look back and go, how bad would it have been to have to scrounge free agency for one more guy rather than overcommit on years to this guy?
Yeah, and I don't think I'm beating up on Miles Michaelis. I think I'm being fair because look, that first deal when they got him from Japan was a fantastic deal. And he was
Oh
he
yeah,
was amazing that first year. All-Star. I mean, two-time All-Star. He's had some really good seasons. He's even had a couple years. I mean, his second year, which we think of as like not a good season, 4.16 ERA through 184 innings. He's been a really reliable, good pitcher. To me, it's more about an aging starter who's going to turn 36 this year and he doesn't strike people out. I don't think those folks age really well, especially when it's not the Cardinals defense of a few years ago when everybody was a gold glover. And now you don't have the shift and all that. I don't feel like the Cardinals have that coaching strategic advantage that they used to have, right? It seemed like the Cardinals used to be really good. They didn't It wasn't just that they had the horses out there, but also like shifting. They seem to always be right on it. And now you
yeah.
can't do that as much. And I feel like Miles Michaelis is the one guy we joke about weak contact. It is brought up a lot, but he allows a lot of contact. And this isn't a great defense. I know this year it's been better, clearly, but you're probably going to have a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of traffic with Miles Michaelis. And the difference is when Lance Lynn, we brought up earlier, Lance Lynn can strike a guy out to get out of that jam.
Right.
Miles Michaelis is usually allowing contact when he's in that jam, and a lot of times they're falling in.
And that's how that inning can spiral on you is you're like, well, I need the double play ball to get out of it, or I need the pop up to get out of it. If you don't have the strikeout as a weapon, and look, I'm not going to say he'll never strike anybody out, but he's not going to as frequently. In fact, his strikeout rate is higher this year than it was last year, but it's still 6.8 Ks per nine. That's not as much of a factor when you're talking about constantly being in jams and needing an escape hatch. Miles just isn't going to have that to the same degree. So he is more susceptible to when the soft contact falls in, which happens to every pitcher. But because he allows so much contact, he led the league in hits allowed last year and earned runs allowed. Part of that is because of how many innings he pitches, but the other part is just the sheer amount of contact that he gives up. So when he says soft contact, it's like, oh, there was a bleeder that fell in, but then I gave up a home run, and it would have been the final out if somebody would have just caught that 57 exit velocity off the batted ball. But that's not the way it works. And so when you're susceptible to that, there are going to be times that it does eat you alive. And for Miles, it's happened more times than not so far this year. It's only April for him, so maybe he's able to turn it around. But yeah, like I think that's the conversation. I understand what you're saying. Like, we're being fair. Like, the numbers are the numbers, but it's even worse than it was last year. And if it can just get back to last year, like a 4.7 ERA with a FIP that, by the way, last year, you talk about FIP. FIP is, I like it for a guy like Michaelis because in 2022, when he was an All Star, he had a 3.87 FIP, but a 3.29 ERA. So he outperformed his FIP by like half a run. Last year, with a 4.78 ERA, his FIP was 4.27. It was only zero point 0.4 difference in the FIP from year to year for Miles. The Cardinal defense was way worse last year. So that's, instead of being lucky by a half a run on ERA, he was unlucky by a half a run on ERA. If he can just get back to a 4.27 FIP like he had last year, I think that ends up being just fine. His FIP is over 5 right now, and even with a better defense, it's not really produced the results that you want to see so far.
Yeah, and this is why I mentioned this earlier. This is why I do love FIP because you just very well pointed out that a couple years his FIP was, let's say, a half run ish different, positive or negative. But for his career, a career 4 ERA, a career 4.06 FIP
Yeah.
over 950 and two-thirds innings. It usually evens out over your career, but not for a specific season. I do think with the soft contact, I always laugh because we almost only talk about it when it goes the opposite way. For
Yeah.
example, over the weekend, Miles had a really bad outing, and he was also a wind gust away. Siani climbed the wall there. Now that wouldn't have been a homer, but if it's
It's
another
bad.
mile an hour windier, it's a grand slam. Like
Yeah.
we don't talk about that as much. I know sometimes I'll say, "Hey, that was a rocket. It was caught," but I feel like we always point out when the bloopers fall in. We never mention the rockets right at people.
Yeah, and you're deserving of the contact that you give up, and that was hard contact that Siani made a great play to, even if it's not a home run, if he doesn't catch that ball, 2, 3 runs score and the inning continues. Like, those things are realities of the outing as well. So I do think that's fair. I knew you were going to bring that up because I forget if you were on Hot Take Central or what that was that I heard you talking about that maybe it was on your YouTube channel. I listened to one of your videos, but that,
Mhm.
yeah, that's an example that it is part of the entire matrix, and so you got to mention it. You're right.
Okay. I like the Matrix reference, like you're Andrew Tate over here. Okay, let's finish on this. I have a couple questions and I have a big question, but here I'll go quick. Here's why when I look at the Cardinals lineup last night. Let's just go quick. Do you think these players are going to have a good year? When I say good, league average to above. Brendan Donovan.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think that.
Wilson Contreras,
Yeah.
Lars Nootbaar,
Yes.
Arenado,
Yep.
Goldie,
Yep.
Gorman,
Yeah.
Herrera,
Y ooh, uh, better than 100 OPS plus? Yeah, I think Herrera will have that as well.
Win.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Just say yes.
He's doing it right now. He won't be below 100, I don't think. No, so I'll say yes.
Okay.
I don't think he'll do what he's done, but I think he can be above average, but barely.
Agreed. The reason I brought that up is I did the exact same thing. Now, I purposely skipped Burleson. I don't feel great about him.
Yeah,
Siani is what it is, and Walker didn't play last night. But you and I are pretty much in unison. That's 8 guys. We feel pretty confident about 8 guys being
on
damn
paper.
close to league average. That's why I think the offense is going to figure itself out.
Yeah. No, you're right, and I am sort of anchored to my views from before the season. Like, I look at Goldschmidt now, and you're like, do you think he's really going to have a 101 or better I was going to say ESPN plus, OPS plus? I do. I Even though it's going to be a haul to get there, I still think he's going to end up doing that. So yeah, to your point, Cardinals fans, you do the same exercise, and if we're wrong, tell us in the comments below here. which guys are not going to get to a league average offensive production. If you look at OPS plus or weighted runs created plus, that's what we're talking about. Who among that lineup last night is going to be, other than Ciani, is going to be below 100? I think is a fair question.
Yeah, and by the way, if Wynn and Herrera are 97, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about guys who aren't going to be 80s, who aren't going to be 20% below league average. Okay, so my final question for you, we're pushing an hour, is do you think last night? So people, I'm going to release this the second we're done, so it'll be
Wow.
Tuesday here around lunchtime. Do you think
Tuesday. Go
Tuesdays
ahead.
with Maury? Do you think that last night's win is it a turning point?
Ugh.
Or is it just like, are they going to lose the series and we're going to go, oh man, that was a fun night? Or do you think it's the start of something?
I don't think it's either. I'm gonna go Paul Goldschmidt on you. Like, I think that it's a sign that the guys that are capable of doing it can do it. It's a reminder of the thing that we already knew was true, that a Paul Goldschmidt is not gonna go a whole season. Like, I think there were maybe some Cardinals fans in the dumps about him going, he's aged out and this is it. He's toast. Whereas I think most reasonable people were like, he's probably not the guy that he used to be, but he's still going to be league average or better. And as the weather warms up, he's going to come out of it. Same with a Nolan Gorman. He's a streaky guy and he's starting on a bad streak. A good streak is probably around the corner because he's 23 and he just didn't suddenly overnight forget how to hit a baseball and he sucks now. So, like, I feel like the proof of concept of the guys that we knew could come around, we felt kind of dumb saying it for 5, 6, 7, 8 days in a row without anything to show for it. And now it's like, all right, see, remember, like that's probably going to be something that is allowed to happen in the cosmic nature of the universe. Goldschmidt can hit a home run. Nolan Gorman can hit a home run and can come up with a big swing in the clutch. So I think they're gonna move back toward, bouncing back. The lineup is going to be what it is. The rotation, I understand you got some concerns. Miles Michaelis pitches, and those guys sometimes they whisper softly a home run over the fence, and like those things can happen. But I think largely the team is in place where if you just go through every spot, you go, I kind of like this team. I think on paper they're good enough. So it's not going to just suddenly be a spark and they're going to Mike Schilt 17 game wins in a row right now. But I think we got to see that last night to go, all right, they're probably going to be somewhere around the middle. Can they find the edge to get above the middle? They're going to have to go out and prove that. Last night's game is not going to do that for them.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say what you just said is where I am. When I say the Cardinals are a good team, I still feel like whatever that win total is, 82, 3, okay, 81, 84, I don't know. That puts you with a chance to make the playoffs. And again, it puts you in the place where maybe you add at the trade deadline. So in me saying all these things, when I say I think the offense is going to be much better, I still think the rotation will be middle of the pack. I think it gives the Cardinals a chance. So everybody watching, I'm not saying the Cardinals are going to win 90. I'm not saying they're going to win 87. I think they have a damn good chance still to be competitive for a playoff spot. Um, and we'll see. But also, that's not saying a lot, especially
No,
now
it's not.
with more playoffs. It's easier. It's easier to make the playoffs than it's ever been in Major League Baseball the last couple years. So the bar has been lowered, Brendan, but not for this show. We've raised the bar.
Of course, we've raised it. Yeah, we're both saying the same thing. I feel like on July 17th, we think they could be a game above or below 500, which might be close enough to compel them to add the pieces they need. That's really all I think both of us are saying, and that's not high praise. And maybe they do go on a run where if the offense starts to, if they have a week where they score 6 runs every day, and we go, okay, maybe on paper the offense that we thought was there in February has started to arrive, and we can think about this team a little more favorably. But until then, it's just scrounge around 500. Don't get too far below, and then maybe the front office will show some urgency and add and change the dynamic of the team if that's something this team needs come July.
All right. Well, follow Brendan B. Shafe daily. And then are you B. Schaefer 12
Are
on
you
YouTube?
B Schaefer? What's your Yeah, it's youtube.com/ my Twitter handle at B
Okay.
Schaefer12. The at is part of it. Um, my YouTube channel. Charlie works hard. He likes NASCAR though better than he does the Cardinals. I put out new Cardinals content every single day since March 28th. Charlie, sometimes he can take Bernie Miklaus's content and then it works out for his channel. But no, I'm just kidding. I
Hey, first of all, the Seeing Red podcast,
That's a
which is out
partner.
there,
That's a
it's a
partner.
really, really good
It's a great
program.
show. Yes.
Will Leach and Bernie Miklaus. And just so everybody knows, so I can break these narratives. They are being compensated for their
That's
work.
why I said it's a partner of the Charlie Marlow enterprise. I just tease. But I have been kind of working my ass off making new videos or audio every single day. So if you subscribe to Charlie, because 7,000 of you do, I don't get it, but he does good work. You could subscribe to me too, and that would be my plea. So
Yeah, no, I'll be honest. I mean, you do more than me. You certainly are more invested right now, doing the live streams and all that, and you're at the games, man.
it
You're at
helps.
the games.
It helps, but you have the entertainment factor. You've got that
Oh, I'm a
boyish
clown.
TV charm. No, I mean you're just that former TV star that people when you're sitting out on your patio with your AirPods, they have to see what you're saying, right? They have to get invested in what you're talking about. So I get it. I'm not knocking it.
All right. On that note, please comment, like, subscribe to both of our channels, but this
That's
one
right.
first. And
Surely he'll link me in the description. Surely.
I always do that.
I know I'm
I
skidding.
always do that. And maybe I don't want to promise because Brendan gets mad about this. I'm not going to promise we'll do another podcast this week, but we might. We
Charlie
might.
is the king of overpromise, under underdeliver when his schedule stacks up on him. No, it's your schedule. You're a busy guy. You work hard. You work until 2 a.m. last night. I'm just giving you some grief in fun. It's all in fun.
I know. Real quick though. So as of now, starting this week, podcasts,
Yeah.
hour a week. I got Brendan and I. That's you. Eric Messersmith and I. That's another hour. Ooh, I should tease this. I have a NASCAR podcast starting with a former NASCAR driver this week. I'm not going to mention who it is.
Oh.
Kenny and I do a short podcast. So there's a lot, and there's a lot of editing. Kenny's channel requires probably 40 to 50 hours a week of just editing. Seriously. So that's my spiel. Love you all. Love you, Brennan. Comment, like, subscribe, share the show, share the channel, put it in your group text, put it on social media, get the word out. Brendan, we'll see you maybe later this week, but maybe next week. See ya.